Hello and welcome to the instructor's introduction video for the high key and low key learning unit. So the main topics of this learning unit are going to be high key and low key photography. I'm going to get a little bit more into exposure modes that your cameras offer, and it might translate also to shooting modes that your camera phones offer. I'll be talking a little bit about in-camera metering modes, and again, some of this information translates to your camera phone depending upon the kind you have and applications. You can download in-camera metering applications as well for your phone. Check that out. We'll be going over understanding your histograms, and so again, remember that these blue underlined words takes you to links either within the course canvas, which is what we've got going on here, or to an off-canvas website or video. I'll also be talking a little bit about post-production. I'll mostly be referring to Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Lightroom. I'm a big fan of Lightroom. There are tons of different post-production programs that you can use. And I'm going to let you do that research, but I just want you to be aware that learning about post-production is a really great tool for having more control over what your photos look like. And then, of course, quick links to the 2 homework assignments that I'll talk about in a minute. So as we navigate this learning unit, there's an introduction for just what we're doing with this idea of high key and low key photography. We'll be talking more about the quality of light. And here's a 2-minute video where this woman just sort of introduces these ideas in a quick, basic way so it can get your creative juices flowing for this week's learning unit. And a couple of helpful links. These are some of my photographs. Owning my own photography business for many, many years, I rely on high key and low key. So I've kind of given examples, talked a little bit about the lighting, and a lot of times like backlighting, but then exposing for the shadows, right, allows you to get this very dreamy, high key look. This is high key with flash fill, so the sun is setting, there's this huge light, directional light coming in, but then my flash went off, so she's illuminated a little bit in an even way, as opposed to here where there's no flash that goes off, so it's a much different exposure. The flash went off. So kind of, again, controlling the outcome of your images, being high key, low key, or low contrast, which I'll talk about in the lecture. Just taking control over your exposures and the type of language that you should be using when you think about a photograph that is predominantly bright and light and kind of airy. That's called a high key photograph. And so these are examples of those visual styles that a lot of photographers use. And then here's some, whoops, I have a typo here, I'll fix that. A low-key photograph. Oops, no, it's underneath. So sorry. Scroll down. So a low-key photograph, this is just a tungsten room light that was available in this family's home, and it's a longer exposure. I think it might have been about 30 seconds to a minute. And just more examples of how I've applied the concepts of low-key and high-key to the portraits that I've made of my clients over the years. And more examples of low key. And then here's a cool example of we'll be talking about exposure quite a bit, and I'm using something called your spot metering mode. So here's a great low key type photo. Obviously there's this very bright white area that's the window. So I basically made this exposure by exposing for the highlights, which is the window. So it goes completely blown out. And you just get a little bit of detail in the shadows, just giving the lighting ratio between the highlights and the shadows. And same scenario, same scene, but here I've used my spot meter and I've exposed for the shadows, which means that the highlights are still very blown out, but you can see more details. So same scene, but different effects by using different exposure techniques. And that those exposure techniques are used in these terms of high key and low key. This is my instructor's lecture. It's about 19 minutes long, along with the PDF. So don't forget, you can download the PDF and like navigate it on your own time, revisit the artist's work that I might have mentioned, and just all the great information that I've put together, which will also be helpful for the weekly quiz. So we're also talking about histograms, and the reason we're talking about histograms is because it applies to this concept of high key, low key. So for example, this histogram is showing most of the details in the shadows. It's an underexposed image, but if you didn't if you didn't compare it, it could just be like kind of a really dark, low key image. And then the correct exposure, the histogram, is mostly in the middle tones. And then the overexposed, most of the information is in the highlights. And so I'll be talking a little about where to find the histogram. You might need to look that up on a tutorial. The important sort of terminology around RGB histograms compared to like the luminance histogram, which is more what you see here, where it relates specifically to the overall exposure. Definitely read everything that I've given here and check out these links so you better understand histogram clipping. That's an important concept that you should know about. And then I talk a little bit about RAW versus JPEG, because when you shoot in RAW, your histogram is still displayed in JPEG mode. So it's just something you should be aware of. This is a great 4-minute video that just kind of further explores ideas around the importance of learning about your histogram. And a couple of links that might be helpful. And then a short summary on high key photography, which is one of the homework assignments that you'll be creating this learning unit, a video that kind of goes into studio lighting, but it still will help you with understanding how to create high key photographs. And information about low key. So a summary, a couple of ideas to think about as far as subject matter, background, the lighting, what to expose for, and again, another video that talks about some concepts that will be really helpful. I know that he's working in a studio, but yet the concepts that he refers to throughout the video will be really helpful in you better understanding low-key photography. And these are a bunch of student examples that will relate to the project, so you'll recognize some of these. And also just some examples of how students have applied these concepts to the creative assignment, which is part of this week's discussion post. So these are examples that you can cruise through to just get inspired of different ways of creating low-key images and or setting up environments for high-key, or just looking in the natural world for high-key imagery. I put together 8 women photographers, kind of from all over the world. So you'll want to check out these links that I've included. You're going to need to study and research one of these photographers and include a response to what you learned, got inspired, thought of their work. So be sure to check out these links. They're a great source of inspiration. There's probably a video in one of these. You know, I try to always find short videos. And then you can also do further research on your own to learn more about, for example, one of my favorite photographers, Carrie Mae Weems. Some of the helpful links that have been spattered throughout the learning unit, and also some new ones that you might not have seen yet. And then the first homework project, so high key, low key photography. There's a 9-minute video where I go over the details. There's 2 parts to this homework project, kind of a technical part. So you're gonna wanna watch the video, review these details. This is an example of the technical part, along with the exposure information, what kind of camera or phone you're using. And then there's a creative part, so kind of applying the technical skills of high key and low key to hopefully some really fun creative photographs. Prompts that you need to respond to. Like I said, you're going to pick one of the artists off that list and give us some ideas about what was inspired you or that you were moved by when you reviewed their work and why. And an example of the submission, which I cover in the video above, so you can check that out. And you'll want to respond to 2 of your classmates' posts, and I've included some prompts that will be really helpful for you to do. Of course, there's a weekly quiz. And then I talk a little bit about post-production. So I'm just going to introduce the concept. There's some videos if you want to check them out and some helpful links. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Lightroom, but there's all different types of post-production programs and applications out there. I'm happy to answer any of your questions if I can, but I encourage you to think about, no matter what kind of camera you're using or photographs you're making, to consider applying some sort of post-production to your creative process of making your photographs. And then we've got some helpful photo gear. So I'll try to always kind of add these little pages where just, you know, how having a big light source like a window or something onto a patio, and some, you know, background stand or some DIY, make it yourself reflector cards. You know, window light is great. Just window light and a white wall and a reflector card just bounces light up. It can really make for some great, beautiful high-key photographs. A tripod is really helpful. So, you know, a little list of things might be some stuff you want to look up that are not very expensive. A tripod, a reflector card, a cable release, and a UV filter. And here's just some pictures. So UV filters can help to block out some of the ultraviolet rays, which would just add a little bit of contrast to your photographs. And then cable releases are really helpful for longer exposures or self-portraiture. You can program them. They range in a huge variety of prices. So all of these links kind of go to some potentially helpful websites. But again, I'm here if you want some help with trying to figure out what kind of stuff you might want to buy if you're interested. So that's pretty much the low-key, high-key learning unit. If you have any questions about my photographs or any of the topics that are discussed in this learning unit, just feel free to reach out to me via the email in Canvas. Thank you so much for listening.